Hi. So we have been exploring the learnings and reflections from the field, coming from um, the Leading Accountability Program, part one. And just to recap, it's split into two modules. Module one focuses on creating accountability. Module two focuses on keeping people to account. So that's the context in which we're working. This learning comes from the second module, which is keeping people to account. And in an earlier video around the learning and reflections from the field, I talked about the energy of accountability and some learnings that came out of that. So in a recent engagement, either in individual coaching or group coaching or with email exchanges, in supporting the leaders in their development and their application of this, something came up that several people noted. And we drew the conclusion, which I will share with you in a minute, that I think has important implications for leaders keeping people to account. Because oftentimes, I think in organizations, there are expectations for leaders to ensure that the accountability is dealt with, that the incident is dealt with, and that it doesn't happen again. And whether or not the person being kept accountable receives that or not, the expectation from the organization and for the leader is to ensure that it gets dealt with, that it is done, and that we move forward. And I don't think that relationships work that way. So there is the relationship between the leader and the person being kept accountable, or the team being kept accountable. And in that case, there's the relationships between the team members. Then there's the relationship between the team members or the individual and the organization and all other stakeholders and parties that are involved. And sometimes when we keep a system or an individual accountable, it influences the nature of the relationship that that individual has with others, which can influence the change and that accountability is demanding, or it can influence the future work that may be required, whether it is to deal with the incident or just in general for the person to be productive within the organization. And so part of what we address when we talk about the energy of accountability is that dynamic. So we've been talking about how respond differently. And one of the learnings that I shared earlier is that if somebody, for example, becomes defensive, it doesn't help to land the keeping accountability until the defensiveness is dealt with. Because if I'm defensive, for example, and you still keep me accountable, and it is just one of those things that you have to get off your plate, and I have to deal with the consequence, and I have to fix it, but I'm still defensive, I might do what you require of me as a leader, but I may disconnect from the relationship. I may change my part of the connection to the relationship with you or the organization or the work being done. And you as a leader, having hoped that keeping me accountable will bring some form of change, that change may not happen. So if the purpose of accountability is to bring right action, to restore what is needed in the ability for a relationship to deliver value, if that is the case, then I think leaders may also carry a responsibility to ensure that that occurs. So in the previous learning, we talked about first dealing with the defensiveness as an example, and then dealing with the accountability part. It's almost as if there is something around the responsibility for a leader to do everything that they can to ensure that the accountability is taken in a constructive way. So part of what I'm realizing is that I'm talking through this and it's still pre-language, and I'm using a lot of words to explain this. It's not simple yet. And I think the nature of this itself may be complex to a degree. So if we say that accountability and relationships are functionally connected together, one is a function of the other, then the learning and the conclusion that we drew together as leaders is that for me to keep somebody accountable, there has to be relational connection. If that connection isn't there, then the intention for the accountability to bring constructive change isn't going to land. And so the focus should be around first establishing and maintaining and deepening that connection, because it's almost as if the relationship connection is the conduit or the electricity cable that helps the electricity flow, if I can use an analogy like that. So if there's this connection, it is likely that the force of accountability, keeping the other person to account, won't be able to address the impact, the broken commitment, on either on the relationship or on the function part. So if you think about a relationship as two entities, and they are connected, if that is the relationship, that connection, we tend to utilize the relationship that we have in order to create positive value in the world. Without connection in relationship, there can be no agreement in order to create value in the world. So it is not that we are transactional about it. People are connected in relationship. That's how we are. And for us to move forward, we create value. And for us to be in organizations, there is an exchange of value all the time. And so the nature of relationship depends on that connection. And if I'm keeping you accountable for something that you broke in your commitment, that can have an impact on me trusting you. That can have an impact on future work. It can also have an immediate impact in terms of the value that needed to be delivered that was committed. It also puts me in high stakes. So unless that connection is there between us, me working towards resolving what was broken, me working with you towards resolving the value that we need to deliver, and trying to fix what is impacted on in the relationship may not occur. What are you hearing? How is this landing for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts.